Okay, we are rolling on the What is Philosophy lecture. So, hi, as a reminder, I'm Dr. Black. I'm your instructor for Introduction to Philosophy, and this is your first lecture, What is Philosophy? Why are you getting it on a video? Because no, there's another reason. Because I am, as of the time you watch this video, unless you watch it very late, shame on you, I am indisposed and unavailable to join you in class. Just for the first week, I will be with you starting in week 2, but that means that the usual first full session lecture that I give, the What is Philosophy lecture, you're getting it on video. So you won't get to see my frantic gestures, jumping up and down, and loud stomping in person. You poor things. Anyway, um, so let's dive into it. What is philosophy? I find it useful to start off introduction to philosophy classes with a little primer on what philosophy is, because philosophy is a strange subject in the sort of grouping of subjects that you might take in your first year of college, in that it's not really analogous to anything that you have in high school. I mean, some high schools are offering philosophy classes now. I get that. There's some philosophy classes, college philosophy classes available as concurrent enrollment, depending on your school. But the vast majority of you will not have had the opportunity to take philosophy in high school. You'll have taken English, so when you get to college and sign up for an English class, you know what that is. You'll have taken history, so when you get to college and sign up for a history class, you know what that is. Math, all kinds of other stuff, science classes, things like that. You know what those are. Philosophy classes, on the other hand, you get to college and you sign up for those, and you wonder, what the poop is this? So we're going to go over that. The first couple of things we're going to talk about is what philosophy isn't. And then I'm going to get into a little bit of how it got started. Not much. I'm not going to do a history thing. Just, gesture at it. What characterizes philosophy as distinct from other disciplines. And then a little bit of why we want to do it. Why should we care? Okay, so the first thing that I like to get out of the way up front is a definition by etymology. Philosophy is derived from Greek words philos, love, and sophos, wisdom. It's generally held to mean, roughly speaking, the love of wisdom. I don't find that a useful definition. I don't get it. Philosophy is the love of wisdom. Well, what are you going to do in philosophy classes? Write love notes? Make cards? Decorate philosophy books with little hearts and glitter? No! Dadgummit, no. That's not what we're going to do. I don't find philosophy is the love of wisdom to be helpful in the slightest, not even a little bit. So, yeah, I hate it when people are like, well, start off with like, philosophy is the love of wisdom. That's useless. That doesn't tell us anything helpful. Something else that I get a lot, philosophy, I get philosophy as a sort of some kind of weird poetry thing where people are like, philosophy is sayings. I told someone once that I taught philosophy, and they said, what's your favorite saying? I don't know. My favorite saying? I'd like a burrito supreme and a taco supreme and a large drink. I don't know, that's my favorite thing to say. I don't know. I love you to my spouse. That's my favorite thing to say. That's my favorite saying. I don't know. How about get off of that to the cats? I say that a lot. Must be a favorite. Philosophy isn't sayings. It's not. It's not just some sort of weird poetry, like the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. lot of people are like, that's Glossy. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's literary, it's poetic, it isn't Glossy, not really. Philosophy is not your opinion. That's one thing I definitely do not want in this class. Don't get me wrong, I love you all. And I want you to do well. And I want you to have opinions. But this is an intro philosophy class, and what I'd rather you have is arguments. We'll get to that in a minute. I'd rather you have reasons for things, believing the things you have. I don't want you to have opinions. I want you to have informed views. I want you to have stances that you have evidence and reasons to back up. Opinions, well, you know the saying about that. And I'm not interested in sayings. Ha! Anyway, philosophy isn't New Agey bullshit. Not going to even get into that. I resent the fact that I often find the philosophy section next to the New Age section in the bookstore. That aggravates me. So that's, none of this stuff is philosophy. What philosophy is, go get to it. What philosophy is a rational attempt to understand the universe that we live in, and specifically to answer the important non-empirical questions. Let me repeat that. Philosophy, I'm going to put it on the screen, maybe, you hope. Philosophy is the rational attempt to understand the universe that we live in, and to answer the important, and particularly to answer the important non-empirical questions. I'm going to try and touch on each element of that definition in the balance of this lecture. So, okay. In order to do that, though, I'm going to need to go back a little bit. I'm going to talk about, very briefly, I'm going to talk about the origins of philosophy as we understand the term. Okay. So, in ye olde times, back in the Bronze Age, and before even, presumably before humans even had writing, please attend my humanities class for more of that, presumably before humans even had writing, they were having discussions and thoughts about the world that they lived in. They were trying to figure out, they were trying to figure all this shit out. They wanted it to make some kind of sense to them. It's a complex world. Life's tough. There's a lot of empirical questions, like, why does it rain? Why did I get infected after I cut myself? You know, a lot of very, questions that deal with physical phenomena. And then there are the questions that deal with things that aren't physical, like, what is the point of life? Am I a good person? How can I be a good friend? Is there a best way of organizing society? Things like that. I'm sure they had thoughts about these questions, and they had explanations that tried to answer them. And that's a kind of philosophy. That's at least adjacent to what we do when we talk about philosophy. But in the broad, and we don't really know what they were saying to each other because they didn't have writing back then. But about 5,000 years ago, give or take a little bit, humans invented writing, and we today have the ability to look back and see what they thought. And the kinds of explanations they had then, where they tried to answer those questions, what is the point of life? Everything from, what is the point of life? Am I a good friend? Blah, blah, blah. All the way down to, why does it rain? And why did I get infected when I cut myself? All of those had the same kind of answers, and those were theological answers. Answers centered around the idea that the world is run by incredibly powerful beings, gods, monsters, whatever you want to call them, spirits, whatever. Incredibly powerful beings, and they're the reason why all this stuff happens, and also the reason why why it is true that there are certain answers to the questions like how can I be a good person, what is the best form of society, so on and so forth. What is the best form of society? Oh, to have a king who talks to the gods for us. Okay, why is that the best form of society? Because the gods said so. Duh. Right? It's a theological explanation. See, it's a theological answer to that question. Why does it rain? Oh, because Shu, the rain god, made it rain. Okay, it's a theological answer to that question. And that's not a philosophical answer. That's not philosophy as we understand it. It's adjacent to it because it is trying to answer some of the same kinds of questions, but it is not taking a philosophical approach. We'll talk about what makes an approach philosophical in a minute. So around the time humans started writing things down, the explanations they had, the answers they had for questions that are philosophical in nature, the answers they had were non-philosophical. They were theological. Why does it rain? 'Cause the gods. Why would you think that? 'Cause the gods. See, it doesn't go anywhere. Okay. So how did this change? Gradually over the course of the Bronze Age, which is conventionally taken to run from about 3500 BCE to about 1000 BCE, over the course of the Bronze Age, for 2,500 years, humans clung to these theological explanations to fundamentally philosophical questions. And the reason that they did was that these questions all put creatures that were not human at the center of the picture. So if you think the world is run by gods and monsters and spirits, and that humans just live in it, and they're just trying to survive like rats with a little piece of cheese, while the big monsters stomp around and make everything happen, that's a plausible approach to take, a plausible stance to take, if you don't feel very powerful, if you don't feel like you have a lot of control over the world, if you don't actually have any understanding of the science of infection or crop growth or rain cycles or anything like that. If you don't get any of that, you don't know why it happens, then the gods get it is it's as good an answer as any. It's one that makes sense, But over the course of 2,000-ish years, humans got better at understanding and controlling their world. Again, I go into this in more detail in my humanities survey, so if you're interested, go there. But they got better at understanding and controlling their world. Now, the belief that humans are important and can know and control their world is called humanism. And humanistic explanations put humans at the center, rather than centering mysterious forces or gods or spirits or whatever. Slowly then, over the course of several thousand years, humans adopted a more humanistic view. And by the end of the Bronze Age, they were dipping their toes into the idea that we might be able to understand and explain our world in a more satisfying way than just saying, I don't know, a bunch of gods did it. Why did that happen? The gods did it. Like, we might have a better explanation than that. We might be able to get a better explanation than that, even if we don't have it. Now, around the year 1000 BCE, a lot of civilizations around the Mediterranean went kablooey in what is called the Bronze Age collapse. Again, my humanities class, if you want more details. This kind of set back intellectual progress for a little while. But a few hundred years after that, around 500-ish BCE, a few hundred years after that, most of the major societies on the planet had started to really get into philosophy. In Greece, you see the pre-Socratic philosophers starting to do their thing. We'll talk about them in a second. In China, you see some of the early philosophers sort of developing their systems of thought. In India, you see some early philosophical work there. It's all happening. It's happening pretty much all over the planet. Those are the ones I know about mostly because that's my area of expertise. But it's happening pretty much everywhere and around the same time. Okay, so these philosophical experiments, these philosophical programs that were being advanced at the time, around 500-ish BCE, were attempts to understand the world without reference to gods and spirits. For instance, there was a philosopher in Greece named Thales who taught that everything in the world was made of water. And that is why everything ultimately is made of water, and that is why everything seems to change over time. That the fundamental principle of the universe was change. That things decay, things change in shape and size over time as they wear away with the elements. Nothing stays the same. That the only constant in the universe is change. Now, if I walked up to you and said everything is made of water, you would think I was a loony, and rightly so. And obviously, Thales' attempt to explain everything by saying, it's all water, everything changes all the time, doesn't really fly. It's not good enough. It's not a good enough explanation for us. But notice, at least, he's trying to explain things, the mechanics of the universe, why certain things happen, how it all works, what it all means. He's trying to explain this stuff not by talking about gods and spirits, but by talking about just the mechanics of the universe. He's not saying people get old because the gods have decreed we must die. No, he's saying people get old because fundamentally we all have the principle of water within us, and water does nothing but change, and over time we change and we sort of grow weaker. And yeah, it sounds batshit, but it's also an attempt to weave a grand explanation of things that is humanistic, that does not involve the gods. It may involve the sort of mindless mechanical processes of the universe, but it's not about gods. It's not a theology. It's a philosophy. Now, Thales was one of the pre-Socratic philosophers. Why do we call them pre-Socratics? Because Socrates was a Greek philosopher who lived in the 5th century BCE, so that's in the 400s, and when he came along, he changed the game. He basically defined the way we do philosophy, him and his student Plato, defined the way we do philosophy even now, 2,500 years later. The pre-Socratic philosophers in Greece, and also the philosophers in some other parts of the world who were active at that time, they were attempting explanations of the big phenomena. How does the universe work? Why does all this stuff happen? Am I a good person? Blah, blah, blah. They were attempting to answer all these questions without talking about gods, but they were attempting to answer them in a structurally similar way to the theological explanations that had gone before. Let me explain. The theologies, that is, the explanations of how everything works based around gods and spirits and monsters, the theologies of the Bronze Age wove great pictures, big stories that were all connected. All the parts were connected into a single unified vision of the world and how it works. It all tied together. And the pre-Socratic philosophers, and a lot of the philosophers outside of Greece at this time, they were not using gods in the story, but they were telling big stories. Thales didn't want to explain why you got old. He wanted to explain why you got old and what makes you a good person and why the sun rises and why the weather. He wanted to explain everything all at once. And so his answer was water. Water. Oh, water. That's what he wanted. He wanted to explain it all at once. The other pre-Socratic philosophers were similar in this regard. They weren't just looking to give explanations of individual phenomena or ideas. They were trying to take the same basic approach as theologies, the theological explanations, by weaving a great big picture of everything. They just didn't want any gods in that picture. Okay. So, Pitbull changed the game. No, sorry. Socrates changed the game. That's a reference, very specific reference to a TV show quote. Anyway. But also the music of Pitbull, which, isn't half bad. Alright, Socrates. Socrates changed the game. Let me apologize for the Pitbull thing by showing you our kitty, Phaedra, who is very young and very sleepy. Anyway, she's adorable and also a terrible troublemaker. Okay. Anyway, Socrates came along mid-ish, about the mid-5th century, the mid-400s BCE, and Socrates had an approach of asking questions about what words meant. If someone was talking about love, saying, "Oh, well, I love her," he would go, "What do you mean by that? What do you mean by love? When you say you love her, what are you talking about? Break it down for me. Break it down." And then he would sort of work with each concept. They'd be like, "Well, I want to be with her." And it's like, "Well, is there any situation where you could want to be with someone and not love them?" And he'd be like, "Yeah, I guess so." He's like, "All right, what makes this different? How do you know this is love and not the other thing?" Oh, hard question. They didn't like Socrates. I'm going to talk about that, but they killed his ass for being annoying. Probably justifiably, but we'll talk about that later in the semester. But Socrates changed the game by initiating what we call analytic philosophy, which is to say, philosophy, which, remember, is a rational attempt to understand the world that we live in, specifically by answering the important non-empirical questions. It's an attempt to do that, not by weaving a grand picture that just happens to exclude gods, but by tackling each individual concept separately. By taking the idea of love and trying to break it down, trying to analyze the concept, and then moving on to something else. We're not presupposing that we can weave a unified story. We're happy if we can get a modicum of clarity on one small corner of the universe. And hopefully, over the course of a long time, and a lot of philosophers working together and working, in conversation with each other, we hope that we can start to fill in a larger picture of what's going on in the universe. Okay. So that's analytic philosophy. And that is basically still the same thing that we do today in philosophy. Socrates never wrote anything down, but his primary student, he had several students, but his sort of main guy, Plato, wrote down a lot of stuff, both stuff that Plato thought himself and stuff that he said Socrates thought. And their approach, the way that they approach these problems, sort of not by copying the format of the theological explanations but erasing all the gods, rather by developing an entirely new approach to understanding the world, which is by taking a single idea and trying to worry it to death, trying to break it apart and get inside of it and figure out how it works. That basic approach is how we do philosophy now, even. And that's that analytic philosophy approach. That's our method. Okay. So that's sort of how it started, and sort of how we got to be the way we are. Why we're as messed up as we are, us philosophers. So let's talk a little bit about what characterizes philosophy, what makes it different from other stuff. Because some of you sharp-eyed people may have noticed that when I start off defining philosophy as the rational attempt to understand our world, you might be going, isn't that just science? You're not entirely wrong. So I want to draw a distinction that separates out philosophy from some other stuff. Okay. So let's talk first about the keyword there, rational. Rational comes from, the word rational comes from the Latin, and is ultimately cognate to a word that means based on reason, or having reasons. When you say someone is being rational, when you say someone is being irrational, what you mean, even if you couldn't have told me this necessarily, what you mean is that they are acting without any good reason, or believing without any good reason. If I think everyone is out to get me, despite overwhelming evidence that most people don't know or care who I am, then I'm being irrational. It's irrational to think that everyone is out to get me when most people don't give a crap. So, okay, sure, that's irrational. If I believe that my kitty can talk and sing and dance, you might say, why do you think that? Now, that's the moment, right? If I give you reasons, if I go, well, the other day we had a long conversation and I recorded it, after which she did a extensive dance break and sang the entire soundtrack of High School Musical 2. Yeah, I said it. It's better than High School Musical 1. Yeah, it is. Fight me. If I give you reasons why I think that my kitty can talk and sing and dance, I mean, I'm not being irrational if they're good reasons. But if I say, I think my kitty can talk and sing and dance, and you say, why would you believe that? And I say, I just do. I'm literally being irrational. I literally have no reason to believe what I believe. It applies to actions too. I know that you are all familiar with doing something for no good reason. Like there was no reason to do that. I got a good one. I had a friend who firmly believed, and mind you, this was back in the late 80s, early 90s, when personal computers in the home were still a new thing. But he firmly believed that when you turned on your computer, you had to let it turn all the way on, turn it off again, and then turn it back on, and then you could use it. And I was like, why do you think that? And he was convinced that this was the way to like start up a computer because it would just perform better. Like it had to start up once and then shut down to like get its memory all clear or something. I don't remember the exact reasons he gave. They were dumb reasons, so they haven't really stuck with me. He was firmly convinced of that. and then he would, start it back up again. So these were bad reasons. He was acting irrationally. There was no good reason to do what he did, even though he thought there was good reasons. I know that some older people still think that you need to go out and start your car up when it's cold, not just to let the heater run to warm up the cabin, which is perfectly reasonable. If you don't want to get into a cold car, that's fine. But I know that some people think you still need to go out and let the car run so that it won't damage the engine or something to help the oil circulate. In modern cars, that's not a thing. Modern cars are designed so as not to need that. It doesn't matter. You don't need to start the car and warm it up in cold weather unless you just want to let the heater run so that you can get into a nice warm car. You don't need to do that for the safety of the engine. Modern cars are designed so that that is not necessary. So to do that would be irrational in the sense that there's no reason to do it if you're not talking about warming up the cabin of the vehicle. Okay, so rationality, to be rational, means to believe or act with reason rather than not. When we say that philosophy is the rational attempt to understand the universe, what we mean is we want to gain clarity, we want to get beliefs about the universe that are based on reasons. That aren't just based on tradition, that aren't just based on theology or something like that. Why do people get sick? Because the goddess of disease and death, Erich Kegel, decided they should. That's a stupid reason to believe people get sick. It is. I'm sorry. It's just dumb. I hope I haven't offended any worshippers of Erich Kegel. Yeah, that's a dumb reason. Because there are good reasons to think people get sick. Like you can talk about germ theory, viruses, things like that. Those are good explanations that are based on reasons, real reasons, good reasons. We want beliefs that are based on reason and not theology, not tradition. Why do we do it that way? Because, come on, man, give me something more than cuz. Give me something more than cuz that's the way it's always been done. Come on! The rational attempt to understand our universe. We want answers. We want to believe with reasons. We want to be rational. Now, some of you might be contrarians and say, what if I want to be irrational? Well, you don't. I'm just sorry. That's the only answer I have to that. You don't want to be irrational. Because if you can give me an argument for it, then you're giving reasons. So, sorry. You've already lost by playing the game. But the other thing is that you literally can't function that way. You can't say, I want to be irrational. And it's like, well, then good luck driving or talking to people or doing literally anything in life in a world governed by reason. It's literally impossible to be irrational and functional. It just doesn't work that way. So rationality is a goal. And philosophy is characterized by the attempt to put rationality right at the center. To say, I want answers to my questions, but I want those answers to have reasons. I don't want them to just be answers that make me feel good. I don't want them to just be answers that have been handed down from posterity. Or from our ancestors. I don't want them to be answers that are arbitrary, that are just answers because they sound nice or they're poetic. I want there to be good reasons for believing these answers. So that's the first part that characterizes philosophy. The centering of rationality. The second part is the fact that philosophy takes as its subject matter non-empirical questions. This is where we get into the distinction between philosophy and science. Science, as we understand it, used to be a branch of philosophy. It was called natural philosophy. as opposed to synthetic philosophy. No, I'm kidding. I shouldn't throw in jokes right now. It'll confuse you. No, science, as we understand it, used to be called natural philosophy. And the idea was that you could reason out things about how the world works. And you can still see that, yeah, science employs the same basic techniques of rationality. Why do we think that water freezes at 32 degrees Fahrenheit? Well, because we have evidence, man. We have reasons. Why do we think that light bends in strong gravitational fields? Because we gathered evidence and we put together an argument. We got reasons. We have reasons to believe it. Science is rational. But science deals fundamentally with questions that are empirical. Empirical is just whatever can be quantified or measured. How tall the tallest person in class is an empirical question. Because how would we decide it? Well, we would go around and measure everyone and then see who's the tallest person and how tall they are. How many people in Tulsa are sick with the flu every year is an empirical question. We may not know the answer to it. It may be hard to get the answer to it. We may be able to make guesses at best, but it is an empirical question. Because if we had the power, the way to answer that question would just be to count up all the people who are actually sick from the flu every year in Tulsa. Like, for instance, what is the temperature on the nearest planet that can support life? That's an empirical question. We don't really have any way to answer it because, we don't even know which planets near us can support life. The question is empirical, even though we don't necessarily have the tools to answer it right now. How many grains of sand are there in the Sahara Desert? It's an empirical question. It's not a very interesting one, but it's an empirical question, and we definitely can't answer it. We can make some very vague guesses, but that's it. We definitely can't get a really precise answer. We lack the ability, but it's still an empirical question. Non-empirical questions deal with things that it's not just that we don't have the power to measure them or quantify them. It's that they are non-measurable and non-quantifiable by their nature. How tall is the tallest person in class? An empirical question. Because the fundamental nature of the question deals with things that can be measured and quantified. Height. How good a person is the nicest person in class? You gonna whip out your goodometer? Take some goodometer readings? See how much good there is? 83, you're very good. No, that's dumb. That's ridiculous. Such a thing does not exist because goodness is not the kind of thing you can quantify or measure. It's not simply that we lack the power. I want you to keep that in mind. We lack the ability to count the grains of sand in the Sahara Desert. But grains of sand are the kinds of things that can be counted. Sort of by their nature. They can be counted in theory. And the question, how many grains of sand are in the Sahara Desert, is an empirical question. It's just an unanswerable empirical question. Meanwhile, am I a very good person? Is non-empirical. There's no way to measure your way out of that question. But it might be an answerable question. Despite the fact that we have no way to do any measurements or or take any readings or anything like that, we might actually be able to answer the question: Am I a good person? Am I a very good person? There might be plausible answers. So not all empirical questions can be answered, and non-empirical questions often have ways of answering them. There are reasonable ways to answer non-empirical questions. What separates them is that non-empirical questions deal with the sorts of things that cannot even be measured or quantified. Not in a practical sense, but in a conceptual sense. They're not the kinds of things that can be measured or quantified. Okay. So that's what characterizes philosophy in particular, as opposed to science. Science is a rational attempt to understand the world we live in, but it deals with the empirical. It handles the stuff that we can measure and quantify. That doesn't cover everything we care about, though. There's a lot of stuff that we care about that is within the realm of that which can be measured and quantified. Care about the propagation rates of viruses. We care about the growth cycles of food-bearing plants. We care about all kinds of stuff that we can measure and quantify. It's important to us. We care about how much weight bridges of different materials can bear up under. These are all empirical questions. We care about those. They matter to us. But a lot of questions that matter to us aren't empirical. What's the point of life? Am I a good person? Am I a good friend? What is the nature of love? Do I have free will? Or is there some kind of destiny controlling me? What does it mean to be self-aware, to be conscious? Is it meaningful at all? Or just an accident? What is the nature of happiness? What is the best form of society? What is freedom? Do we have rights? Are those things that exist? Not legal rights, but natural rights. Is there some moral force in the universe that says I have a right to be free and to be who I am? These are non-empirical questions, and they matter very much. We care about them a lot. We hella care about them. Yes, I can say hella, sorry. They matter. They matter a lot. We can't measure our way out of them, so we can't science at them. So how the hell are we going to answer them? Pow! Sorry, Fager. Philosophy. I scared the shit out of the cat with that. She was just bathing herself happily. And she jumped and like, ah! Okay, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, kitty. Okay. Ridiculous child. Yeah, we can't science at these questions because they're not empirical. So how do we answer them? Because we're not just going to give up on them. They matter to us. They're important. We're going to do philosophy at them. We can't science at them, so we do philosophy at them. That's how we do it. Boom. Okay. Last bit. Why do we do this? Well, I think I just kind of segued into that. Rationality matters because there's not really any other game in town. Irrationality on a local scale, on a small scale, irrationality is fine. We all have certain irrationalities. I have weird little things that I believe or do that aren't strictly rational. And for the most part, they're harmless. They form a part of my day. It is what it is. At the end of the day, when I'm done using my computer, I close all the windows. Just so that my desktop is nice and clean. Is there any reason to do this? Does it make the computer run better? It does not. The computer does not give a crap. But I do it anyway. It's just a little thing I do. It's nothing that matters, so because I want to... I mean, it may not even be irrational, because the stakes are so low, because I want to might be a good enough reason to do it. Like, that might not even be irrational. That might not even be doing it without a good reason, because I wanna might be a good enough reason. Just like I wanna is a good enough reason for me to sit the way I like to sit in a chair, rather than some other way. I wanna. Okay, that's fine. Rationality does matter, though, because in the broader sense, on the larger scale, rationality is the only game in town. You literally can't go around being irrational. You make decisions based on reasons. You do things because you avoid stepping out into traffic because you saw a car coming. Reasons, damn it. Good reasons. Rationality matters. And the questions that we care about aren't going away. Philosophers have been wrestling with these forever. What does it mean to be a friend? What is the nature of love? What is the best form of society? These are literally things that Socrates was talking about, as recorded by Plato. See, I brought it back. Ha! These are things that Socrates and Plato were talking about. And 2,500 years later, we're still talking about them. These questions aren't going away. So, if we want to try to get our hands around these questions and be rational, philosophy. That's literally what it's for. For dealing with these kinds of questions that won't go away in a rational fashion, rather than just picking answers by spinning a wheel or throwing a dart, or, just copying whatever our ancestors did, or whatever. Philosophy is the coming up with good answers that have good reasons. That's what it is. So that's why we do it. The other reason we do it, though, aside from the urgency of it, the fact that it does matter, is that you don't get to not do it. I hate to break it to you. But even before you signed up for a philosophy course, you were doing philosophy. If you've ever tried to come to grips with a question like, am I a good friend? Am I a good person? Is this love that I'm feeling? Sorry, that's a song. But seriously, if you've ever tried to come to grips with questions like that, you're doing philosophy. Philosophy is literally a part of the human experience. These big questions are definitional of what it means to be self-aware and human and alive. And yeah, you could try to answer them in non-rational ways, but most of us, I think, on a very fundamental level, want reasons for the answers. We want to not just have answers, but to have confidence in them, to believe that these answers are well-founded, and that we have a good reason to believe them. So, in a sense, you're already doing philosophy. You've already done a lot of it in your life, probably, or at least some. And if you're going to be stuck doing philosophy anyway, you might as well get good at it. You might as well learn how to do it properly. I like to compare it to swimming. Most people can swim at least a little bit. I mean, in a sense, swimming, a certain level of swimming reflex is just built into the human DNA. Just in our animal brain, the unevolved bits of our animal brain knows how to swim at least a little bit. So like if you throw even a baby in the water, not something I go around doing. If you throw a baby in the water, it'll make movements to keep itself afloat without having to tug anything. And that's kind of like philosophy. You're stuck doing philosophy. It's a part of the human experience. It's just there. But some people practice swimming. They do a lot of swimming. And they learn special techniques, and they get really, really good at it. And that means that they can do it really well and really efficiently, and they can maybe teach you how to do it better because they know all these techniques. And that's sort of where I am. I got a PhD in Philosophy. I've spent a lot of time doing it. I practice it. I've learned a lot of advanced techniques. I'm really good at it. But what you are doing as someone who hasn't even had a philosophy class yet, and what I am doing as someone who literally took all the philosophy classes and then finished, no more, ever again, we're not doing different things. We're just doing the same thing at a different level. So it's not like some of the courses you'll take it in college. Like if you take a course on, I don't know, if you took a course on electrical engineering, yeah, you can learn how to do electrical engineering and then do the electrical engineering, and the people who haven't taken the course aren't doing it. They're not opening up circuits and rewiring things. I mean, I hope not. They don't have any training in it. A lot of the courses you take in college are things that people who don't have that knowledge don't do. You learn how to do a thing that other people aren't doing, that they don't know how to do. Philosophy isn't like that. Philosophy is something that we all do, every single one of us, and I only know more tricks on how to do it better. But I'm not doing anything different than you. I'm just doing it with a little more style, you might say. And I can help you with it. I can help you practice and get better. But fundamentally, we are doing the same thing. And if you never took a philosophy course, you would still be doing some philosophy. Just maybe not as skillfully. So, what is philosophy? It's the rational attempt to understand the universe, particularly by answering non-empirical questions. The important non-empirical questions. It got started when people tried to formulate answers that copied the basic format of the theological explanations, but left out the gods. They were humanistic answers. And it developed into what we do now when people started to forget about copying the format of the theological explanations and just focused on dealing with one issue, one question, one idea at a time. Philosophy centers rationality. That is to say, it centers the giving of reasons to believe certain conclusions, and it focuses on the non-empirical, because science, which used to be a part of philosophy, has kind of spun off into its own thing, leaving philosophy with all the non-empirical stuff. We do it because these questions aren't going away, and also because it's just kind of definitional of what it means to be human. You can be human without ever doing any electrical engineering or chemistry, or even without reading a lot of history books, I think. But you can't be human without wondering things like, am I a good friend? Is there a point to life? I don't think you can be human and not have those thoughts at some point. So of all the classes you'll take in college, philosophy classes are the ones where you're going to be doing something that is an elemental aspect of the human experience, as opposed to just a thing that people might learn to do and then do, but they can easily not do if they don't want to. So, that's the lecture. It's so weird not having feedback from y'all. I am normally the type who stops every couple of minutes and asks, are there any questions? Are you with me? Do I need to repeat this? Blah, blah, blah. This time, I just kind of rolled through it. Took about as long as I expected it to, because I normally block off about 15, 20 minutes for questions. So this clocking in at just under an hour, so that's about right. But it is weird. I'm glad that next week I'm going to be in the classroom with y'all. And I'm not going to be doing this anymore. don't love it. But hopefully this was helpful, and hopefully you got something out of it. If you need to rewatch it, God help you, but please do. And I will see you all next week. All right. TTFN.